Today we're going to do what we consider routine maintenance on a small engine. We're using a brush cutter today, but what I'm doing here could be applied to all your small engine. The difference is you wouldn't see the cutter head and so in your water pump or your generator or your lawnmower, but they all would have a spark plug, an air cleaner, fuel tank, and these are the areas that we're going to concentrate on. So we're going to do it in a very systematic way. First, we're going to remove the spark plug. We're going to clean the spark plug, inspect it, clean it, gap it, and replace it. Then we're going to proceed to the air cleaner, where we're going to remove, inspect, and decide if there's a need to change it or just clean and replace. Then we're going to inspect the filter that is in the fuel tank. So the tools that you need to do this routine maintenance, you need a spark plug spanner. And spark plugs are not universal. You have different sizes, as you will see. This one carries a bigger plug and something like this. And then you have a smaller size plug where this will be appropriate. It's important to have the correct plug spanner, because if you use the wrong spanner, you could actually do damage to the plug. And the removal now would become something that a machine shop have to undertake. So in this machine, we have to remove 4 screws to access the spark plug. Older machines, you would see the spark plug exposed. This is for safety reasons now, and also for aesthetics in the machine. So first we remove the 4 screws that this cover is housing the spark plug. The technique we normally use is we slacken the 4 screws diagonally. So first you slacken one, slacken the other one. Mind you, on your machine, you may not have to go through all of this. The spark plug might be accessible directly on the machine that you can remove. So we slacken them and then we remove them. All the way. So after removing this shield, the second step is to remove the spark plug. You first remove the high tension wire. This is done by not using a pliers and so on and roughing it up. You gradually turn this until you get it off. If you aggressively remove this, sometimes you could have some problems with the contact section remaining on the plug, and that will give you a little more problems to rectify. We install the spark plug spanner, make sure that it is the correct spanner. The technique I use the palm of my hand, and with a tap, you break the spark plug. If it can be removed with your hands, remove it with your hand. If it's a little bit stiff, use the spanner. Remove the spark plug. First thing you do when you remove the spark plug, now you want to examine it, because the spark plug could tell you a lot about the condition that the engine has been working under. So what you look for here is any soot, any carbon, any deposit that you may see on this. Very often, if you wasn't mixing your oil and gas properly, or you're using stale gas and oil, you will see a lot of deposits, a lot of scale, a lot of carbon, and this has to be removed. This operation is done periodically. Probably every 25 hours of work, it is advisable that you remove the spark plug, examine it, clean it, gap it, and replace it. There comes a time when you have to replace this. Right. So after examining the plug for carbon and so, we get into the cleaning of the spark plug. If it's very dirty, a lot of carbon deposit, you can use some carburetor spray to soften the carbon. And this, you will do this discreetly, not in the people's face and so on. Your protection is important too. You just soak it for a while. Use a wire brush. I didn't say a steel brush, because the steel brush normally gets rusted. And these wire brush can be had for about $30 a pair. So the technique is that you don't hold it and just, aggressively. You clean it, physical cleaning. You can make a tool from a piece of old hacksaw blade. You sharpen the end, very universal, very common in our country, and do further cleaning. If you don't have this, you can use a hair clip. You can use a thin piece of wire to do physical cleaning. So you get all the carbon out, you clean it out, and then we are at the stage where we're going to gap this plug. After you physically clean it, if the plug is, if the electrode, the center electrode shows sign that it is worn, you will see yes, it will not be flat. You will see an oval shape. Then you know it's time to change the spark plug. Or if the spark plug wasn't firing, wasn't sparking, then you have to change it. So after you have removed all the carbon deposits and so, what you want to do is to ensure that the electrodes are clean also. A piece of emery paper, probably 200 grit or 250 is appropriate. And when we say 200, the smaller the number, the coarser the sandpaper. So we want something like about 200, and you can fold it over and get it between the electrodes, and you want to keep it square. And you just pull it, using it very square a couple of times until both electrodes are clean. All right, the third step is gapping the spark plug. If you read in some text and so, they will tell you use a feeler gauge to gap the spark plug. But the feeler gauge and a hacksaw blade, you can replace your feeler gauge by using a hacksaw blade, because the hacksaw blade has the same thickness that is recommended for this, which is about 25 to 30 thousandths of an inch. So you do not have to invest in a feeler gauge, which might cost you $50. Whereas a piece of old hacksaw blade that you remove the paint and you can shape it to do additional cleaning can be used to gap the plug. The gap is a space between the two electrodes. You want a gap that you feel a little drag on this hacksaw blade. To accomplish that, if it's too slack, you want to tap it on a metal surface. Might look crude, but this is the universal way of gapping the plug. If it's too tight, you want to just flare it a little bit, and you feel a little drag. Invite somebody want to feel the, all right, you feel a little drag. It mustn't be too tight, it mustn't be too slack. And with this now, your plug is gapped. Before going further, you might want to see if this plug is sparking, if it's the quality of spark. We can test a spark plug without using any fancy equipment by simply reinstalling the plug into the high tension wire. We have to ground it on a metal part of the engine block, preferably the engine block. And you give this a tug. Ensure that your switch is on, because if your switch is off, there will be no current. So your switch is on, and you ground it off, and you give a vigorous pull, and you will see a spark. So you now know that you have current here. Now this could be a dangerous operation if you wash this plug with gas or carburetor spray. Those are very flammable liquids, and this could burst into flame. If you have raw gas around, it could burst into flame. So you have to be mindful of that and practice some safety when you're doing this. You can also get a serious shock if this has a leak. Sometimes this develops resistance and cracks and so, and you can get a serious shock from this. So you have to be careful when you're doing this operation and take the necessary precaution. And with that, we know that this plug is now cleaned, gapped, serviced, and ready to be installed. Okay, the next step is to reinstall the spark plug. Always ensure that this base washer here is intact. Sometimes when you remove the plug, this stays back. This assists with sealing the combustion chamber and also dissipating heat. It may sound strange, but this little washer here is very, very important. So make sure the washer is intact. Replace the spark plug. If you find it's not going in as, screwing down as easily as it came out, take it out and try again. Because if you damage the threading on this, it will cost you a bundle to replace. After it's seated, replace the spark plug spanner. Don't just pull like, you will never take it out again. Just give it a little turn, and you feel a little pressure here. We're not going to use any torque wrench or anything on this, but a little pressure. Over-tightening this could result in stripping the threading. You replace your high-tension wire, and you replace your shield, when replacing the shield, try and don't force it in. If it came out easily, it should go back easily. Make sure it's grounded well, and then you retighten the screws. Again, run all the screws down. Don't tighten, the first one. Run them down, and then you start tightening again diagonally. The next maintenance job is servicing the air cleaner. On all engines, you have an air cleaner. Small, large, diesel, gas, you have an air cleaner. The function of the air cleaner is to strain all extraneous material, all dust, dirt, leaves, whatever, gravel, from getting into your engine. Working your machine without an air cleaner, you're going to ruin it very rapidly, because all the sand and dirt that it would have trapped would get in the engine and work like sandpaper inside your engine. So on this unit, it is very simple. We have 2 screws that you remove. And you remove this cover that covers the air cleaner. What we have in this unit, we have what we call a pre-cleaner. This is a very fine mesh that actually traps the heavy stuff. So it saves your air cleaner from contamination. So this could be easily washed with soap and water, or premix, or even carburetor spray. You can use the carburetor spray to clean it. But we prefer soap and water because that is safer, and it's safe to use with this. So the cleaning method is, don't use anything too aggressive like a wire brush. You could damage this. You can use a paintbrush and just soap and water, and you wash this. You can knock it to remove the excess water and so. This here traps the very fine particles, the dust particles and so. This one you don't wash. If you have an air cleaner with sponge, like you have in your cushion, you see that type of sponge, you can wash that with soap and water again, squeeze all the water out, put a couple drops of oil and knead it up. With this unit, this felt is not to be washed. You can use compressed air and blow it out. You can knock it out. You can blow it out, but you do not wash this. If for some reason this is saturated with oil, let me say you're using very stale gas or very poor mixture, this could become saturated with oil, and it's ruined. You have to change it. This is in fair condition. At this stage, the little dirty points are not that detrimental. We can just knock it out and replace it. So the replacement is just the opposite of removal. In this case, this is in fair condition, this is in good condition, this is clean. So we replace it, and just try and remember, when we replacing these things, there's a sequence, there's a certain way. If you're doing it for the first time and you get confused, don't just try and force it on. Go back again and try and do it. This part goes in here. This is your pre-cleaner. Your pre-cleaner goes here, and then you replace this cover. So it's not a very elaborate exercise, and it is not something that we're going to tell you, well, there's a rigid routine. You can do this probably once a week if the conditions is rainy and there's not a lot of dust. If you work in very dusty condition, you will need to do this probably daily. As a matter of fact, you may even need to do this while working in the field, depending on the conditions under which you work. The next step is servicing the gear head on your brush cutter. On your other small engine, you wouldn't have this thing like lawnmower and so. This brush cutter has gears in this housing. If you do not service this, it will cost you quite a bit of money, because this might cost about $1,500 to $1,700. And if you service this routinely, this should last the life of the machine. A lot of people fail to service this properly. The technique is, you want to clean the area properly using a wire brush or a paintbrush. Clean it out, clean it properly, and use a spanner that corresponds with the head of this nut. In this case, with this unit, this tool did the spark plug, the gear head, and can also do other routine maintenance. So after removing the grease plug, you want to examine this head to see if there's evidence of grease. And by peeping through the hole, you can see grease, or in a worst case scenario, you will see shiny gears. That means that that machine was not serviced properly. So if you have some evidence of grease, you want to ensure that there is sufficient grease in the head. In this model machine, the manufacturer sells a grease in a tube with a corresponding threading, where you thread into the head and you squirt. You don't squirt so much that when you take this off, you see grease backing out. You must have a cavity for expansion. If you put too much grease, what you would do, use a clean screwdriver or a clean pallet stick or something and remove some and leave a cavity there. And you replace the grease plug after this. This is done routinely after every 50 hours. So you're going to inspect and add some grease every 50 hours. The important thing here is the type of grease that you use should be lithium based. Yeah, lithium based, because the type of gear that you have here, lithium gives you the kind of protection that you need. Multipurpose grease would not do. So what you just witnessed was what we would consider a routine maintenance of a small engine. As I said before, we prefer to do preventative maintenance, so we don't wait until the machine has broken down, because sometimes you have other things that go bad if you wait to do breakdown maintenance. So we went through the spark plug, we did the air cleaner, we did the gear head, and we could also check the bolts and nuts that would be available, make sure that everything is tight, because during operation, this machine vibrates a lot, and things can get loose. So you do a general examination, and if you know your machine is well serviced, then you can go there and work it hard. You can work it very hard. But if you know that your spark plug may not be in the best condition, you wouldn't get the optimum performance. So what we saw here could be applied to all small engine. You wouldn't have a cutter bar in your pump or your lawnmower, but you will have a spark plug that you will going to clean and maintain. You have an air cleaner that you're going to clean and replace if necessary. And you may have additional parts on your lawnmower, like examining your blades and so on. But generally, your air cleaner, your spark plug, those are critical areas. We say the air cleaner probably once a week or as necessary. The spark plug you can clean and gap every 25 hours or so. You don't wait until you have problems in the field. It's also a good idea to have a spare air cleaner and spark plug at home, because these are things that you change routinely. So with this operation, I hope that you go and practice some of these things, because very often we see farmers going to technicians and paying a bundle for cleaning or gapping a spark plug or replacing an air cleaner. So you can do this home. The mere fact that you were given a spark plug spanner tells you that they expect you to do some maintenance, especially if you're spark plug. So if there's any questions, you can ask it now. Questions?
But if the filter continue to get the fuel, what causes that?
That is a sign of poor management. It's either you put in too much oil in your gas, or you're leaving this gas. Now that I have completed what we consider a routine service on this machine, I want to invite one of you all to do what I did, to really see if you understand and appreciate what was done. So I invite you to go ahead and do it as we